I've heard you say that the United States is in a civil war, and I think most Americans don't perceive that. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by a civil war, I should say a type of civil war, right? And what I mean is that there are irreconcilable differences that each side is willing to fight for in order to get the outcomes that they want. And that in that environment, the issues of how does the legal system work? Is that going to stand in the way of that fight? Or is there going to be a fight that will make the cause more important than anything? So that's the type of situation that we're in. And those gaps, we understand there's wealth and values gaps that are entering into this. This is, we've seen this through history. So where that goes is a different question, but we are in that type of civil war, are we not?
Clearly we are. Clearly we are. How are they resolved? I mean, clearly they can be resolved through violence, but what are the other ways you resolve the kind of conflict we have?
I heard
Normally,
no lies. Heard no lies there. We're sitting down with Tucker Carlson on the after show, taking a look at Tucker and his interview here, his discussion. And his discussion is getting off to a very quick, hot start here. As you can see, we're defining civil strife. Who is Ray Dalio? He's a prominent American investor, hedge fund manager, author, and philanthropist. He's best known as the founder of Bridgewater Associates, one of these big, large hedge funds like the Citadel. He started it in 1975, so this is a guy you want to listen to. He is a Mr. Moneybags, and he thinks that we're in civil strife, civil war, in fact.
They're resolved through conflict because you get to the point where both sides can't reach agreements. Both sides don't even want to talk. Both sides don't want to respect the rule of the law. So when we're dealing with things like sanctuary city issues and we're dealing with enforceability, who has the enforceability? Okay, and you almost have to play out. Okay, enforceability means police forces and such things.
Right, who has, people with guns,
People, people with guns and,
Men with guns.
Causes that just because the legal thing says they shouldn't do that, that's not going to stand in the way. We have that kind of a situation. So we are probably past the point of being able to resolve that by compromise and empathy and all of that. So normally it goes that way. I mean, the only thing that can be done is to have the fear of that create a necessity for having another path. Like we were talking about the debt situation.
Yes.
So can there be a fiscal commission that gets together and then achieves those things or not? I think it's unlikely. I think we're going to more fragmentation. States, there are some states and other states, I think you're going to see more fragmentation. And so, but, it's like this dynamic through history. This isn't the first time this happened. This happens repeatedly through history. And usually, it runs its course.
So the way our leaders in the United States have dealt with it over the past 30 years has just been to ignore it completely, just ignore it.
Well, there's a cycle, The cycle was, let's say, I don't know, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they get together and they were operating in a certain way. And the manifestations of the circumstances, the manifestations of debt or wealth gap or values gaps were not as great. So you didn't, over that 30-year period, have as much polarity in many different ways. So now you've gone to greater polarity. If you watch statistics, everything I do comes from measuring things. So I look at statistics. The gap in measuring conservative or liberal votes in the House and the Senate is the greatest gap since 1900. And the voting across party lines is the least since 1900. So you see this gap. You see it. You see it in the elections, right? The green and so the blue and red. So we're not. It's not just an evolutionary. It's where we are, where we have gotten to. That is the irreconcilable questions. Does the Supreme Court? We thought about the Supreme Court differently not long ago, right? The Supreme Court was the Supreme Court. And so now it's different.
So what accounts, I mean, there are a million ways to measure this and all of them.
Do you agree?
Well, of course I agree. Of course I agree. And I agree with you that every measurement shows the same result, which is the country is polarized.
So we know where we are.
But completely, and we're not sure how it's
I'm just enjoying the ride, sir. Keep on going. Just keep on preaching.
Resolved. But I think it's also worth pausing to ask what happened. What was the change that led to the polarization that was unimaginable even 35 years ago?
The change was in a combination of the system working well for the majority of.
I hope he's going to the big bank bailout. This is a hedge fund manager, been around since 75, started this hedge fund. Basically, you just manage millions, billions of dollars invested. This is basically all it is. He better bring up '08. I mean, it's more than that, but '08 and quantitative easing, all that kind of stuff.
The people, and which has to do with the majority of the people not being productive. You have productivity equals income.
Right.
Okay. So now if you take education and you take measures of how productive or how well trained you're going to be, you see, and therefore also income, your productivity, you see by all of these measures, great gaps that exist. So by way of example, is unicorns and the changes that we're seeing, fabulous changes in what we're seeing in technologies.
Yes.
But it really comes down to, if you take the number of people who have been making those changes and having unicorns in this wonderful world, they go to the best universities and they make these wonderful things happen. That's about 3 million people in a country of a little over 330 million people. And if you take the average, 60% of Americans have below a 6th grade reading level. 60% of Americans. So when we deal with education, you have to make that population productive. And through productivity, they become educated and they become productive. They earn money and you have a better society. So a number of things changed that. It was the combination of globalization and technology. Think about, I remember, and you probably remember, what the middle class working on in the 70s.
It's interesting. You talked about the gap of wealth and the education gap. You didn't mention race in there because that plays a role as far as looking at the demographics. You don't even need to blame or say anything, but that's the problem. And the people we're importing to the country are not reading. They don't even know the language. So you don't talk about that. Then you don't talk about how the gap happened. How did that gap happen? Things like the bailout, things like the pandemic. Those are the biggest. The pandemic is the biggest transfer of wealth we've ever seen in the world, from the poor to middle class to upper class. He better get to that.
Assembly line at an auto plant was like, and how manufacturing occurred.
Yes.
Okay.
That's Make America Great Again. That's Trump. Yes.
A combination of foreign producers and automation.
Meaning that's why he rose up, not that he caused that. Trump was at one point in 2016. Now he's not the same to me, but I mean, still doing some good things. But 2016 was all about the rise against that, what he's talking about. So I agree.
Changed all that.
Of course.
So that produces a larger wealth gap. And then with that wealth gap, we also have very large values gaps.
But it's driven by the wealth gap.
No.
It's both, you know.
The values gap, I don't know if it's driven by the wealth gap. I don't know.
Some population, here we are at the World Government Summit.
It's driven more by education, I would say.
In Dubai, And you have very globalization, and everybody, the elites, let's call them the elites, where they're among the elites, are here doing deals and facing questions and all of that. And at the same time, then there's those who are dealing with their basics. So wealth gaps contribute to it, but there's also values gaps.
Technology is part of the reason that we're here.
Religion.
Yes.
Belief systems. Mm-hmm. These are important too.
Of course. But we're on the edge of this AI transformation.
Okay. Well, that's a good start to this clip. We'll see if I might do some more reaction to this. Ray Dalio. And I agree. I think you need to name names, though. I think you need to get more specific. How did these things happen? But we'll see if I have not listened to this yet. This is Tucker Carlson, Ray Dalio. Let me know. Did he dropped some truth there that a lot of people I don't hear talk about.
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.